Terrorist groups continue to violate the ceasefire announced by armed forces for the third day running. The chairman of the Committee of International Affairs in the Russian Duma says the world should realize that the crisis in Syria can never be solved through arming and supporting terrorist groups. Four people are killed in Iraq, including 2 policemen, and 14 others are wounded in a series of terrorist attacks. And welcome to our news bulletin. I'm Dania Nizam. Terrorist groups continue to violate the ceasefire observed by our armed forces in Deir ez-Zor for the third day running. An official source said that units of our armed forces confronted terrorist groups near Al-Halabiya Square and killed the leading terrorist Ammar Nawar al-Hajar of Al-Qaeda terrorist organization. Another unit of our armed forces clashed with a terrorist group that opened fire on the army roadblocks and security forces. A number of terrorists were killed in Al-Rashidiyya quarter, including one of their leaders called Ghazwan al-Hussein. Once more, there was another violation of the ceasefire, this time in Aleppo's countryside. A terrorist group burnt a bus carrying 14 passengers from Afrin to Aleppo in order to show films on suspicious TV channels, falsely accusing our armed forces of shedding Syrian blood. In the quarters of Al-Ashrafiyya and Al-Marja, the terrorists opened fire on 2 demonstrations calling for the exit of terrorists from both quarters, killing 2 citizens and wounding a child. Another terrorist group attacked the water pump station in the area of Sulayman al-Halabi. The attack damaged 5 pumps and cut off water supplies in the western part of Aleppo. Terrorist groups also attacked the palace with bombs, causing some damage. The governor told the news report that work is underway to fix the damaged water grid in the Sulayman al-Halabi area, and the water will be back running at about 12 o'clock at night. In Homs, our armed forces clashed with a terrorist group that attacked citizens in Al-Qusayr countryside, killing and wounding many of them. In Tel Kalach, our armed forces confronted another terrorist group that opened fire on a roadblock manned by our security forces. In the Damascus countryside, our armed forces confronted groups of terrorists which attacked security forces in Duma, Harasta, Zamalka and Arbin, killing and wounding many terrorists and destroying their equipment. In Idlib, armed terrorists opened fire on our armed forces in several quarters in the countryside. Our armed forces replied to the fire. 2 children were wounded when an explosive device was detonated in a dustbin to the east of the Carlton Hotel in the city. The General Command of the Army and the Armed Forces said that the armed terrorist groups continued their blatant breach of the ceasefire declared by the General Command. A statement released by the General Command said that the armed terrorist groups violated the ceasefire in the cities of Damascus countryside, Daraa, Homs, Aleppo, Idlib and other areas. The General Command affirmed that the armed forces are still carrying out their duties of confronting these groups as per the declaration issued by the General Command of the Army and the Armed Forces on October 25th. 2012. The armed terrorist groups renewed their breach of the ceasefire by detonating a car bomb near a checkpoint for the law enforcement forces in Daraa. A source at the National Hospital said that 11 people were wounded and admitted to the hospital, some of them seriously. The explosion also led to the eruption of fire at the contract department of the communications establishment. Security forces also clashed with an armed terrorist group in El Sanamin in Daraa countryside, killing the terrorists and confiscating their weapons. The confiscated weapons included PKC machine guns and various kinds of ammunition. Minister Dr. Wael Halaqi stressed during his regular tour on a number of the shelter centres that are used by the displaced families in Damascus the efforts exerted by the governmental institutions and ministries to rehabilitate the infrastructure in the areas damaged by the armed terrorist groups and to offer all the necessary services for the return of the displaced families to their areas. During his tour, along with the members of the Higher Council for Relief of the temporary shelters, the Premier was briefed on the displaced people situations, those who have to leave their houses due to the armed terrorist group's terror. Dr. Halaqi listened to the displaced citizens and he took notes of their needs. The delegation checked on the food and clothing stores in the centres as well as the health services offered to them. Halaqi stressed that offering all these families' needs and giving them the required care to the infants is of the utmost importance. He pointed to the efforts being exerted by the state to repair the damaged infrastructure in the areas that were infested by terrorists and to bring security and stability back to these areas, as the law enforcement agencies are working on eliminating the terrorist groups. Al-Halaqi called on all the families who left their areas to go back as soon as their areas become secure and serviced, adding that all the Syrians stand by the people who are forced to leave their homes, and they are doing their best to secure all the citizens' needs so they can go home as soon as possible. On the occasion of the Eid vacation, Major General Ali Abdullah Ayoub, the Chief of Staff of the Syrian Arab Army, accompanied by a number of the officers of the higher command, visited the wounded soldiers in Al-Mazzi military hospital, wishing them a speedy recovery. The doctors briefed him on medical services and treatment of the wounded. He expressed his appreciation of their efforts. He also toured a number of military locations and expressed appreciation of the combat readiness and high morale of our armed forces and their readiness to defend their homeland. He wished them success in carrying out their national duties. Secretary of Aleppo Ba'ath Party branch Hilal and Aleppo Governor visited the military hospital and stressed the necessity of offering the best medical care for the injured armed forces members who were sacrificing their lives for the sake of their homeland. Mr. Hilal and Mr. Aqad offered congratulations to the traffic policemen and praised their role in organizing the traffic movement. The Eid vacation gained another dimension in the areas that were purged of terrorism and began to enjoy safety and stability thanks to the sacrifices of the Syrian Arab Army. Popular youth activities in the area of Jurat Sahia congratulated our valiant armed forces on their blessed religious occasion. They thanked the army for its achievements in the field of protecting our citizens and homeland. The Organization of Syrian Youth continued to carry out its national duties and activities in helping the victims of terrorism. The organization distributed food to families harmed by terrorist attacks. More than 1,000 people benefited from their assistance in the police hospital and the shelters of Dummar. In Daraa, nearly 600 citizens in the towns of Sheikh Miskin and Nawa took the initiative to settling their situation, pledging never to commit anything against national security. The authorities concerned released 122 citizens whose hands were not stained with Syrian blood. This release came on the basis of the amnesty decree number 71 issued by President Bashar al-Assad. The chairman of the Committee of International Affairs in the Russian Duma, Alexei Poshkov, asserted that world countries should realize that the solution of the crisis in Syria can never be achieved through supporting and arming terrorist groups. He pointed out that the US was responsible for worsening the current crisis in Syria. He told the Channel of Russia Today that the Geneva communique approved last June remained the best procedure that can be followed by the international community to solve the crisis. He added that nobody could believe the US or Qatar, where there is no democracy and the opposition is subjected to suppression, when they claimed that they could bring peace and democracy to Syria. Mr. Pashkov affirmed the weakness of the US attitude which supports Al-Qaeda against Syria. As for the Turkish attitude, Mr. Pashkov said that the Turkish authorities are fully aware that if they continue to interfere in Syria, there would be danger for Turkey itself. In Iraq, 4 people, including 2 policemen, were killed and 14 others were wounded in a series of terrorist attacks in several areas. In Iraq, 4 people, including 2 policemen, were killed. A source in the Interior Ministry said 2 explosive devices were detonated in a popular market, killing 1 person and wounding several others. A 3rd device was detonated near the house of the police officer, killing 1 member of his family and wounding 4 others. And now it's over to Vani with the economic news. For more information, you can visit our website on syriaonline.sy. Have a very safe Eid. Goodbye.
Good afternoon. The public textile establishment has made goods worth over 14 billion Syrian pounds since the beginning of the year up till now. The establishment's production and marketing reports have clarified that the value of sales amounted to about 14 billion and 52 million Syrian pounds, 13 billion of which as sales in the local market, while goods worth more than 1 billion Syrian pounds were exported. The establishment pointed in its report to a number of difficulties, including the crisis in the country, its impact on production and marketing, the old production machines, and the difficulty in getting the necessary funding to implement new projects. The Agriculture Director in Dera Governorate affirmed that the irrigated wheat's production is about 41,000 tons, while 6 million olive trees are planted in the Governorate, which would produce 75,000 tons of olives, of which 12,000 tons of olive oil would be pressed. The Director further highlighted that the irrigated area is more than 30,000 hectares, which is 15% of the cultivated land. Cotton marketed from Al Raqqa Governorate's Qatar was more than 100,000 tons, 3,000 tons of which coming from Deir ez-Zor Governorate. It is worth mentioning that the production in Al Raqqa Governorate is at 164,000 tons, 150,000 tons of which will be marketed. A study carried out by the German Bertelsmann Foundation forecast that Greece's bankruptcy and its withdrawal from the Eurozone would lead to a 73 billion euro decline in Germany's growth until the year 2020, in addition to 64 billion euros that the German Treasury would bear because of public and private Greek debts and bonds. The study further highlights that Greece's bankruptcy would lead to a 164 billion euro decline until 2020, in addition to its currency losing more than 50% of its value, increasing unemployment rates, and a sharp decline in domestic demand. And now over to the exchange rates, according to the bulletin of the Central Bank of Syria. And with this, we conclude our news. Thank you for watching and goodbye.